So, welcome to our webinar. Thanks so much for joining us today. I know this is a topic that a lot of folks are interested in. I'm Bram Wessel. I am the co-founder of Factor, and I'm here with Erik Lee, who's going to be presenting most of the work today. So, before we really dive in, let's test the chat. Tell me where you're tuning in from today. And while you're typing, I'll go ahead and introduce myself. I'm based out of Seattle. As I said, I'm Factor's co-founder, and I'm here just to kind of MC this webinar. Wow. Okay, so we've got people from
Oh,
Vancouver,
Canada,
Nashville, St. Paul.
Albuquerque. Oh, someone
Oh,
from Denton. Oh, I got my master's in library science at UNT,
oh, excellent. Missoula, Boston. Excellent. All
New
right.
York City.
All right, even though I can't see your faces, this is going to be a two-way webinar. So I'll ask you to use the chat that you just used regularly to share your thoughts, or Erik will when he's presenting. Share your thoughts and experiences, and if you'd like to ask a question or join in the discussion, just raise your hand. At the bottom of the screen, there's a raise hand button in Zoom. So anybody who raises their hand during the presentation will get an invitation to become a panelist at the end of the session, which allows you to use your mic and camera. And questions are welcome during any time in the chat. We'll try to follow the chat and answer questions as we go, if there's time. And we'll address as many as we can in the Q&A session at the end. All right, so what we're going to cover today is something we've had a lot of people ask for, which is how to align AI approaches for taxonomy and tagging, and how to integrate AI intentionally in your organization. So Erik Lee, who's an information architect here at Factor, has created a presentation for this. So I'm going to hand it off to Erik and let's get started.
All right, and good morning or good day if you're not in the Pacific time zone like I am. Um, and I was looking for some images about alignment, and I ended up finding this one with the ducks in it, which I really like. Like, there's that old saying, like, we're trying to get all our ducks in a row. And you see here, these ducks are mostly in a row, but we got a couple of little outlier stragglers here. So hopefully by the end of this, you'll have some ideas and some thoughts and some ways that you can help get your ducks in a row for whatever workflow or project that you're working with. So this is me. As Bram said, I work at Factor. I'm a taxonomist information architect. I like Dr. Pepper. I like going to movies, and I like kind of weird, strange, and horror stuff a lot. And I am located in Las Vegas, Nevada. So I see we got people from all over, from Canada to New York to Texas to Washington. So welcome, everybody. And my real impetus for this was a lot of times when you're reading about the uses of AI, like they're usually ending up talking about LLMs, and LLMs have kind of taken up a lot of the mental space or the conceptual space in the discussion, to where I think people tend to treat them as the same thing, as synonymous. But not all A's are LLMs. There's different kind of AI models, and knowing and understanding what the different types are and what their uses are can be a good aid in helping you try to integrate AI into your workflow or your project in the strategic way that makes sense for you. So before we go on too much longer, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. So kind of some term setting. When I talk about machine learning or ML, it's actually a field in computer science, and it's a collection of techniques that are used to teach computers instead of straight up programming. So where a program is a sequential ordered set of instructions that are followed, and if you have particular inputs, you expect particular outputs is the way it works. These are a lot more kind of loosey-goosey, basically. Um, and they'll rely on things like neural nets or deep learning. There's a host of different possible techniques they might use. And then generative AI or Gen AI is a type of machine learning model that does huge statistical processing on giant data sets. And from that, it generates new content. Um, and an LLM is a particular kind of generative AI that is designed to output text content. All right. So not even every Gen AI is an LLM. You have your large language models, your LLMs, which put out text. There are ones that put out images, ones that put out videos, ones that put out music. So any kind of generation of new material is generative AI. And really, also, I want to emphasize that AI is itself a tool. It is a type of tool. And as a tool, it has a place in your toolbox. There are good uses for it. There are not so great uses for it. But I want to take a step back and take a look at your entire toolbox, because it's easy to focus and say, like, we need to use AI. And sometimes I think you can overlook what other kind of tools are available in your toolbox. All right, so number one, spreadsheets. So if anybody uses spreadsheets on a daily or near daily basis, if you could just type one in the chat. I'm just curious how many people. Yeah, ones, lots of ones. Yeah, yeah, me too. And really, spreadsheets have a lot of advantages. They have some filtering capability. There's basic data analysis that you can do. If you can use formulas, you can get really good at using formulas. And also they're ubiquitous. So if you're working in a spreadsheet, it's a really safe assumption that you'll be able to share it and present it to others. So it's easy for collaborative work, basically, because just about everyone has access to spreadsheets, even if they don't have access to like Microsoft Office, for instance. And also there are some programmatic tools, and there are some actually really interesting, for instance, Python packages that exist that can do a lot of text analysis, natural language analysis, all sorts of data science type statistical work. Um, in fact, one of my coworkers actually had put together a script in Python that she could pull out metadata information from HTML files for a client's published content, which was really handy, and it can put it into a spreadsheet for us. And what's interesting too is this is actually a really good use case for LLMs, because programming languages are so structured, you can actually get pretty usable code out of it. And another programmatic tool is in the command line. There's actually some good basic text analysis and text transformation functions if you're comfortable in working with the command line. And then also there's other apps and websites like for transformation or cleanup of large sets of data. There's tools like OpenRefine. If you're looking for something like a little WYSIWYG database, for instance, you could do something like Notion or Airtable. So don't get yourself stuck. Don't skip right to the end and get yourself stuck on LLM without, investigating, like, okay, what other tools do we have available? What can we do without using LLM? And then I mentioned before, there are some other models of AI besides LLMs. And a lot of times you're not going to find these just individually kind of out in the wild, as it were. A lot of times these will be packages or added kind of as capabilities into existing products. So there are models like, and they all work via this kind of machine learning processes. And analyzing and processing large data sets. So there's like descriptive, which can analyze data, find patterns and outliers, even create metadata based on patterns it finds in your data. There's predictive, like your predictive text, for instance. It creates forecasts by analyzing patterns in past data. And the prescriptive ones go a step further and create suggestions for updates or changes based on those recommendations. And it can go all the way up to expert systems, which are basically supposed to simulate getting an answer to a question from an expert in that field. So they're a lot more kind of focused than like your general purpose Gen AI or agentic systems, which are designed to act on workflows or tasks with little or no human intervention. And then looking at LLMs themselves, it's also a good idea to understand what their strengths and weaknesses are. So the strengths are they use natural language. So they're really easy to be a user of. You type in a question like you would type it into, if you were typing it in on a chat program or in like Slack to your buddy, your coworker. Like you can type it in, it gives you an answer in English. Like you don't have to like parse anything or worry about like, oh, am I entering this right? There are a lot of different vendors and models out there, from OpenAI to Llama to there's a group called Hugging Face, which has a collection of a lot of different models. There's even that DeepSeek, which is in the news right now. And also it's really popular. So that means right now there's a lot of advice and resources out there on its use. Um, if you're looking for like, well, what happens, what would be a better way to phrase questions or things like that, you can get a lot of actually good information, and there's good resources out there because it's used so much right now. The weaknesses, so where, as I mentioned, programming is a set collection of instructions. It LLMs or Gen AI in general, they're non-deterministic. It's all huge rows of statistical math. I don't know if anyone here has taken algebra and remembers anything like matrices. Does anybody, if you remember doing matrices in algebra, can I see ones in chat just real quick? Couple people, a few people. Yeah, so you do those matrices, and I remember that there was like you had to multiply like the number of rows and the number of columns. So if you like multiplied it, you'd have like the rows of one and the columns of another, things like that. And these are matrices with like millions of numbers in them. So if it sounds fiddly now, just like the way I'm describing it, like you can see why it takes so much computing power to process these. And there's no guarantee on what output you're going to get. Even if you put in the same prompt multiple times, there's no guarantee you're going to get the same output. And then also these models, they prioritize output. So doing these statistics, like it's basically in the model looking for like, what's the next word that is most expected, that is most likely to be next, given all the stuff that's come before. But if it doesn't have a lot of good statistical relation, I'll call it tightness, like if they're not tightly statistically related, it will expand, it will loosen kind of the statistics. And that's where you start getting, what they call hallucinations, where it comes up with a response that is human readable, that looks like a response that actually answers the question and is absolutely made up, like comes from nowhere besides that. And they have created some ways of trying to reduce that. For instance, I don't know, has everybody heard of RAGs? Like if you've heard of RAG architecture for AI, could I do like a scale of 1 to 5? Like 1, I'm just hearing about it now, and 5, like I've experienced with it. If you don't mind putting it in the chat. All right. A few people with experience with it. That's great. Yeah, and RAG, I'm sorry, it's retrieval augmented generation, and basically what it is it's set up where there's an additional knowledge base that's kind of bolted on to the AI model, and it adds statistical kind of relations as the prompt goes to the LLM. So it makes it much more likely that since those relations are tighter, that you'll actually get like the information you're asking about. Um, so a few people have at least heard of it. I see a couple of ones. So man, this could be an entire thing. I'm sorry, I'm your introduction to it, but at least you've heard of it now. And a few people experience with it, which is awesome. And it's some kind of in the middle. All right. So with all of this in mind, let's talk about integrating intelligently. And this is or intentionally, which can be both, but basically what I'm really talking about is integrating it strategically and with intention. And what that really boils down to is finding the best fit. So again, AI is a tool. What's the best fit for this? And it starts with the business need. What we're really trying to do at the bottom of it, at the end of the day, is meet a business need or solve a business problem. And that will help determine what our use case is going to be. Like, what are we actually going to do that AI might be a tool for this? And then again, what are your available tools? What are all the possible options we could have to try to fit into there? And then you want to be aware of both your technical and your business environment for your enterprise or organization. And I'm going to take a closer look at those. But really, your North Star is what is the business need or business problem that we're trying to solve for here. So when I talk about the technical environment, there's a lot of elements to it. So the capabilities. So even things like equipment, like, okay, do we have, the server space to do this? Do we have the number of, licenses that we need? The capabilities. So for instance, if you're, you know, adding something that uses a triple store database, is there anybody on the tech team who is familiar with Sparkle and can do queries? You're going to need that. Availability. Gosh, IT and availability. Everyone's busy. It seems like everyone's busy. If yeah, if you have like a tech team that isn't like already at 110%, like you are fortunate, it seems like. Prioritization. So how are they determining their priorities? Where do you fit on their roadmap? How do you make sure that you can get the time, attention, and resources that you're going to need? And then human in the loop. So using the hands up option, how many people are familiar with the concept of human in the loop? It's at the bottom there.
Actually, let's
Sorry
fall
about
back to typing a one because we just realized that we can't see hands.
that.
Because, yeah, so one is great. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that. All right, awesome. So yeah, there's a few folks. So basically the concept of human in the loop, it's really, what it says on the tin. It is making sure that a human is part of the workflow, that there is actual judgment to check or validate the outputs, and usually the inputs also to like, all right, let's make sure the data that's coming in is coming from a good source. The output, does it look correct? Is there anything kind of hinky or wonky or other synonyms for kind of weird stuff or it doesn't look right? So and it's super important. Like if you don't have that, and we've seen a lot of the horror stories where they just put out like raw output to the users and then it's like, oh, it turns out this is illegal for us to say, or we have, given away half the shop. And then the business environment too. So buy-in, like buy-in is so important. You want to make sure that the people who are, in charge of the management and the prioritization and the purse strings understand what your project and what you're trying to accomplish and agree that this will help meet your business need or solve for your business problem. And who are your stakeholders? Who are the interested parties? These could be, again, in management, could also be the system or product owners for the system or product you're trying to solve for downstream consuming systems. For instance, if you have like a publishing workflow, you might have folks involved in different steps with the publishing. Communication, super important. Super, you can't just spring things on folks, and you definitely don't want them springing surprises on you. And then governance. So what are the roles and responsibilities? Who's going to take care of stuff? What is maintenance going to be like? All of this, yeah, you want to keep in mind. And then this last one, alignment. And I bolded it and underlined it because this is incredibly important. It's something Factor takes really seriously. Like, we have an entire workshop program around it. We keep running into things like siloed data, systems that people just aren't aware of, or this person over here, like all of a sudden we've discovered like a bunch of dependencies, or competing workflows or projects. Like, you really want to make sure that the enterprise or organization as a whole kind of has a view of the ecosystem and understands like the business problems and the use case, and that you're not nobody's kind of surprising or being kind of left behind during the decision process or the working process. All right, so with all of that in mind, I wanted to focus in, especially because the title was taxonomy and tagging, and look at tagging. So let's say we have a business need, a business problem. They're, they can't get analytics for marketing in a timely manner. And it turns out one of the issues is like the publishing workflow is really slow. So they can't get results for their marketing campaigns until like they wait till all the stuff gets published and processed. So they can't get useful numbers like while the campaign is going. All right, so look at that, like, okay, so maybe is there a way we can speed up the publishing? This might be a good use case for like an auto tagger, auto classifying system to make it more efficient to classify the marketing content and speed up the overall publishing workflow. All right, so you'll want to look at the requirements. Like, okay, so what would we need out of this classification system? We wanted to, classify this digital content. So it would probably be, you know, like with that model before, like a predictive type of system. Like, this is what it should be given, the data that I've gotten before. Possibly recommendations for possible additions. Like, we want to make sure we're on top of like trends and stuff. So if stuff keeps coming up in the marketing communications that are going out to the customers, maybe that's something we want to take a look at. But we want to make sure that there's a human in the loop, human-led approval. So like, if it makes recommendations, have a process for a person to evaluate, see, okay, is this really necessary or not, and make a decision on that. So you look at your environment, your business and technical environment. So where would the data be coming from? Like I said, these models do take a lot of data. And what quality is the data? If you're going to train like a tagging system or an auto classification system on, you want to make sure that you're giving it really well tagged content so it is more likely to give the correct tags to other content. If you give it a lot of badly tagged or not quality stuff, you're going to end up with a less quality output. And instead of being more efficient, you're going to spend more time kind of going back and fixing stuff. And that's actually going to possibly even make the problem worse. At least it's not going to make anything better. Look at the data flow. So how is the data going to come into the system? How's it going to leave system? What formats does it need to be in? If you have consuming systems or other, people in the workflow, how's it going to get to them? The responsibilities, again, your governance, who's going to be responsible for like technical questions and and user assistants, who's going to be responsible for making sure that that the workflow is put together in the way it needs to be, who's going to be responsible for training your, folks on working with the auto classification system. And that goes into the workflow, like where does it fit in? Who needs to know about it? What are the changes being made? Possible additional tools. Like I kind of mentioned, a lot of products come as bundles. So for instance, maybe the auto tagger also has a thing where you can use business rules. Like that might be a great way to kind of add some extra efficiency. Like, oh, hey, if it's got this and this, it's definitely going to need these tags. Like if we're using, the product page template for this page, it will need a product, tag or something like that, for example. And what's the roadmap or timeline? How long is it going to take to get actually integrated and instantiated? How long is it going to take to get everybody trained up and aware? And when is the switch going to get flipped? So that's all stuff that you're going to need to be aware of during your process of getting it integrated, and questions that you should make sure you're getting answers to as you're doing your evaluation. All right, so hopefully there's been something here that's been of help to you, something to think about, something to chew on. Hopefully now, just like these little rubber duckies, you can get all your ducks in a row with your workflow or your product or project that you're working on.